What's up? So recently, like many of you, I have been watching The Last of Us, and after watching the first 2 episodes, I started thinking a lot about fridging. Specifically, why The Last of Us doesn't feel like fridging, even though by strict definition, it absolutely is. So then I started thinking of other shows and books I've watched with fridged characters, and wondering if we overuse the term fridging like we do with so many other trope terms. Now, if you're here and you're like, what's fridging? Essentially, fridging is a trope in which a female character is killed, traumatized, or otherwise permanently maimed in order to forward a male character's plot or provide motivation for that male character. So today I want to discuss the origins of fridging. I want to compare specifically The Wheel of Time and The Last of Us and how they handled killing off female characters and what was the difference between the two and why one was so much more successful than the other. And I also want to talk about our enjoyment of media and harmful tropes and how those might go hand in hand, and just overuse of trope terms in general. So join me, I'll see you after the jump. Look, you might not care about the origins of this trope, but I think it's worth talking about just because the term fridging is such a weird trope term that isn't as descriptive as our usual trope names. The original term was actually woman in refrigerators and was named for the storyline in a Green Lantern comic in which his girlfriend is stuffed into a refrigerator dead for him to find. It was coined by Gail Simone, a prolific DC comic writer who started a website called Women in Refrigerators in 1999. I think it's worthwhile to read her opening statement on the site, which is both thoughtful and illuminating. It says, "Hi, this is a list I made when it occurred to me that it's not that healthy to be a female character in comics. I'm curious to find out if this list seems somewhat disproportionate, and if so, what it means really. These are superheroines who have been either depowered, or cut up and stuck in the refrigerator. I know I missed a bunch. Some have been revived, even improved, although the question remains as to why they were thrown in the wood chipper in the first place. I know I missed a bunch. I just don't know my comics desk the way I should. I'm not editorializing. I'm just curious to find out what you guys think it means, if anything." The preceding letter was written and sent by me when I realized one day that most of my favorite female comic characters had met untimely and often icky ends. The history of the idea and the site are listed here, and the responses from various comic professionals are listed here. An important point, this isn't about assessing blame about an individual story or the treatment of an individual character, and it's certainly not about personal attacks on the creators who kindly shared their thoughts on this phenomenon. It's about the trend, its meaning and relevance, if any. Plus, it's just fun to talk about refrigerators with dead people in them. I don't know why. We'd love to hear what you think on the subject or women in comics in general. Thanks for visiting. I ended up clicking through the list, and I did have to chuckle at the first entry, which just states all of Savage Dragon's girlfriends. Okay, so let's get into comparing. I think it's really important to note that both The Wheel of Time and The Last of Us are adaptations, which I think puts them on a little bit more of an even ground for comparing. Now, admittedly, The Last of Us is a video game adaptation, and although I don't have proof or data for this, just my experience in fandoms in general and my own personal feelings, I feel like fans are a lot more lenient with video game adaptations because they feel further removed from a TV show or movie. So there might have been more pressure or criticism towards The Wheel of Time for that reason, but I still think they are technically adaptations, and so it makes sense that we can compare them. Both of these shows have fridging in the very first episode. Wheel of Time has Perrin killing his pregnant wife, and The Last of Us has Joel killing his daughter, Sarah. The Last of Us continues on though, fridging another character in episode 2, Tess, Joel's love interest. Let's start with one huge difference I see between these properties, and the beginning of my problems with the first one, which is that in The Wheel of Time, this fridging is a completely made up plot point for the adaptation. In The Eye of the World, the first book of The Wheel of Time, Perrin is not married. And so in the show, they marry him with a pregnant wife. So they add it just to kill her off. In contrast, The Last of Us in the video game, Joel's daughter and love interest do die in the video game, which makes me feel that the creators were more constrained. These were important deaths in the video game, so they probably felt like they couldn't alter them a ton or completely get rid of them. So I do feel like they had more constraints in the fridging situation. Truthfully, I tried to be very sympathetic to the Wheel of Time creators when this storyline first came out. I was uncomfortable with it. I didn't love it, but I thought I'm gonna give them time to develop this. I understood why they did it. They did it because they wanted to jumpstart Perrin's main storyline through honestly like the whole books, and they probably thought this was a big, direct way to do that. And because of that understanding, I kind of gave them leeway until the season ended and they just didn't do anything with it. This was a very traumatic event, and Perrin, just a few weeks later was already talking about another love interest. Like, that's not how I would personally handle such a traumatic event like that, which I think makes the fridging feel worse. We barely get to know his wife before she's killed off, and then she doesn't really even have that much emphasis on the story. Also, I just think there were so many more options to kickstart Perrin's storyline than fridging his wife. One of my very favorite recommendations came from Brandon Sanderson, actually, when he was critiquing the show, when he suggested that they should have killed off his male mentor instead. It would not have been a female character motivating him, and also just like less traumatic than killing a pregnant wife. Adding further contrast to these two shows would be that The Last of Us actually give Sarah and Tress personality traits, motivations, and individual alone scenes. I think it's brilliant that Sarah is our viewpoint in the first episode. I recognize that in the video game it's the same way, although it sounds like the creators of the game did that mostly to stand out from a crowd of similar games. But by keeping Sarah the viewpoint, she becomes the main character. It's important to note that since I haven't played the game, I merely own it because my husband played it. I thought this story was about a father and a daughter because I just saw the cover, so I assumed Sarah was going to survive the whole time, and the way they made her the main character emphasized that. By seeing through her eyes, her emotions, her actions, she becomes more than just a plot point for Joel, and I think that is a huge key difference. And they do it with Tess too. Although she is clearly not the main character of the episode, she does have individual scenes by herself. We see her personality, who she is. She's a fleshed out character despite the small amount of time we get to interact with her. She has agency in her story. She's not a prop. She's important in a short amount of time to Ellie too, so her death doesn't just affect Joel, but also affects Ellie. She has more people in her purview than just our male character. So yeah, would it be nice if our death count of female characters by episode 2 in The Last of Us was a little smaller? Yes, but they do it in a way that doesn't feel annoying or doesn't feel like I didn't immediately think, ugh, they're just doing this for Joel. And when you're in a situation like The Last of Us where people are getting killed a lot, it just feels a little less like fridging. And to further point this out, if we compare the relative screen times of Perrin's wife, whose name I literally can't remember, versus Sarah and Tess, we're gonna see a huge difference. I couldn't find the exact number, so I just did an estimate, but that's already pretty telling when we're talking about harmful tropes. Okay, so let's finish up with some very important thoughts on this trope. I do think we overuse a lot of trope words, like I said in the beginning, and I really like what Gail said, that this term shouldn't be used to necessarily punish creators or complain at them, but to rather open our eyes and start a discussion on how we use female characters in media. And at some point, female characters are going to die, and their deaths are obviously going to influence the characters around them, many of which may be male. So the idea that we can never have a female character die and it can never influence or start a plot point is obviously just a little simplistic. While I was thinking about this, I think there's two major ways you can avoid your female character death feeling like fridging. The first is to give the female character motivations and scenes and personality traits and make them a full-fleshed character to begin with that is separate from their male counterpart. And two, simply have enough other females in your storyline that the only females in there aren't dead. And ultimately, I just want to talk about that our favorite things are probably gonna have negative tropes, and we don't have to swear them off because of it. It's okay to just enjoy media without diving deep and having to have some giant critical thought on it. I know I do that a lot on my channel, but I think it's always good to remember we can just enjoy things. And some things we're gonna enjoy have tropes we probably wish weren't in there. I can think of a lot of media. In fact, one of my favorite pieces of media definitely has fridging in it, but that's okay. I think the point of these conversations is to just bring it to light, and specifically when I think of Wheel of Time and Last of Us, to talk about ways that it can be done better to reduce the negative effect and just improve our media in general. Okay, So I'd love to hear your opinions on the fridging trope. It's overused, it's underused. Do you think we talk about it too much? If you watched both The Wheel of Time and The Last of Us, I'd love to know if you also noticed a difference, or me talking about it, you notice it. Do you want to defend The Wheel of Time's fridging? Is there other fridging you want to talk about? Please always let me know your comments. I love our discussions and I want to hear what you guys have to say. As always, if you like these deep dive kind of videos, please like and subscribe. That is the best way to support me. And if you want to see what I'm currently reading as well as other nerdy rants, you can check me out on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.